Good afternoon, everyone. We're officially at noon, and we are excited to welcome you to our April YP Monthly Luncheon. We are so glad you were able to attend today, and we are grateful that we are seeing warmer weather in our future. A reminder to anybody that has any questions during the presentation, please put those in the chat. We're happy to address those at the end of the presentation. And with that, I would like to turn things over to your YP Board President, Scott Mcguire.
All right, thanks, Justine. Good afternoon, everyone. As Justine said, my name is Scott Mcguire. I am a VP of Commercial Lending with Green State Credit Union and this year's YP Board President. On behalf of myself, the YP Board, and the Dubuque Area Chamber, we thank you for joining us today for our April YP Luncheon. At this time, I'd like to take a quick minute to recognize our sponsors that help make these events possible. Our ultimate presenting sponsors are Medical Associates, Midwest One Bank, Q Casino, and TH Media. Our silver and YP corporate sponsors include Cartograph, Collins Community Credit Union, Cottingham and Butler, Dupaco, Dutrack, Eagle Point Solar, Forge Social, Fidelity Bank, Grand River Center, Grand River Medical Group, Green State Credit Union, IIW, John Deere Dubuque Works, Kitzinger Harmon Conrady Attorneys at Law, Kunkel and Associates, McCoy Group, McGraw-Hill, Pepper Sprout, Tyson's Home Farm and Auto, and Platinum Supplemental Insurance. Thank you to all of our sponsors. It's my pleasure to introduce today's speaker, Mr. Kurt Strand. He's the president and CEO of the National Mississippi River Museum and Aquarium, as he shares his presentation today on what COVID taught me about leadership. Before I get into his bio, Kurt wanted me to let you all know that the museum is open, it's safe, and it's been busy. So if you have young kids or want to get down there yourself, please feel free to get down there and support them. Kurt Strand assumed his position at the River Museum in May of 2017. In this role, he leads the museum and aquarium's mission to inspire stewardship by creating educational experiences where history and rivers come alive. Prior to joining the National Mississippi River Museum and Aquarium, Kurt held numerous leadership positions at McGraw-Hill Higher Education, including Chief Product Officer and President of McGraw-Hill's Science, Engineering, and Math. Kurt is active in the Dubuque community. He has served on many local boards, including the Greater Dubuque Development Corporation, the Community Foundation of Greater Dubuque, the Dubuque Chamber of Commerce, Every Child, Every Promise, and Dubuque Coral. Kurt is a graduate of the Carlson School of Management at the University of Minnesota. Kurt and his wife, Leanne, live in Galena and have two daughters, Madeline, a senior at St. Louis University, and Clara, a freshman at the University of Iowa. Please help me in giving a warm welcome to Mr. Kurt Strand.
Thanks. Thank you, Scott. Is my screen visible now to everybody?
Yes, it is.
All right, thank you. So I'm happy to be here. I'm a big supporter and fan of this group, and just missed being there in person for everybody. So thanks for virtually joining me. Couple things real quick before we get going. I've been in leadership roles for a long time and have talked about leadership in different areas and groups, but one of the things I think that has really struck me over the last year plus is the pandemic and the unplanned has challenged some of the thoughts I've had, and I know a lot of other leaders have had, and it struck me that I've learned a lot over the last year, sometimes forced to learn a lot, other times chose to learn a lot, but the challenges that we faced and how this impacted so many different businesses is something that it's been kind of bouncing around my mind a lot, how this affects managers, leaders, staff, customers, guests, etc. So just want to start what COVID-19 has taught me about leadership, how to plan for the unplanned, which is kind of a goofy subtitle because you can't really plan for the unplanned. But I think there's some skills that you can develop and processes you can think about that help you handle situations like this. President John F. Kennedy, he's quoted as saying, "The Chinese use two brush strokes to write the word crisis. One brush stroke stands for danger. The second brush stroke stands for opportunity. So in a crisis, as John Kennedy said, beware of the danger, but recognize the opportunity." And we all heard a lot about COVID. We've seen how many cases there were, how many hospitalizations there have been, deaths, you name it, all these different things that have been going on. And it's hard not to think about the bad side of all these different things, but I do realize that some organizations and some people are going to come out of this stronger, positioned in a different way. And so some of my focus today is just going to talk about what kind of opportunities were presented to all of us and what types of ways to approach it as a leader in an organization. And when I say a leader in an organization, it doesn't mean you are managing a lot of people. Everybody in an organization can be a leader. Doesn't matter where you are, you step up, you take responsibility for things, you help. So think about that as a definition of leadership. And it can be any place and anywhere in an organization. So many organizations did change what they did, and the River Museum did. I know other organizations have changed what they did. When I go to a restaurant, they have takeout now that perhaps they didn't have in the past. But there's a lot of things I think that we can all carry forward. And so that's what my focus today will be. There we go. So word cloud, I created this word cloud. I actually didn't create it, I just found it online as I searched for COVID, because there's a lot of things that come to mind. People will think of different things when they think about the impact of coronavirus or COVID or pandemics, and everybody faced something with this impact of COVID. Schools changed, a lot of businesses changed, nonprofits, arts and cultures. There's over 300 museums, large and small, in Iowa. Many are not open yet, believe it or not. They don't have the opportunity to open if they're a one-room museum. Other organizations have closed. You see what's changed at bars and restaurants. And it's taken so many different, it's had so much different impact and challenged organizations in many, many ways. And when everybody focuses on that, you get sort of down a little bit. And that's why I've been trying to focus for our team about what are the opportunities this has presented. It did teach us that things can change drastically overnight. We got notice on March 17th last year that we had to close the River Museum and Aquarium. So we closed that afternoon. And when all this stuff happens, you really need to figure out how to lead through change. When unplanned events happen, what do you do? And the turbulence of this one, I think, is really a way to challenge people. So leaders, one of the first things that I think about as a leader is you need to be agile and you need to adapt. So this is a Blackberry Salamander, and they live in freshwater, river streams. They like to have waterfalls or swift current. And we have these at the River Museum and Aquarium. They're very interesting. When they're young, they forage for food. When they get older, they actually hunt. They're aggressive hunters. And they have evolved over the course of years and years and years to not have lungs. They actually breathe through their skin. And when you come to the River Museum, they're really cool, but they also, the color, they match the background. They've adapted that way, so you may not even see them unless you really focus on them. They're in the building behind the paddle wheel, in case you want to come here and see it. So that, to me, how they adapt is also how a leader should adapt. During a crisis, the leader has to move quickly, pivot, embrace new environments, new working environments, new processes. I was never a fan of remote learning until this past year. I'm sorry, remote working until this past year, because I always saw the value of those hallway conversations. And I think we've learned that we have to replicate those to the best of our ability as we are looking at the organization and try to move them forward. So you need to be able to adapt, and you need to adapt quickly. And my former manager at McGraw-Hill, Ed Stanford, when he retired after a long career, he said his biggest regret is he didn't move fast enough. He didn't adapt quickly enough. And I took that as a lesson that no matter how fast you think you may be doing things, perhaps you're not doing them as quickly as is needed for the success of the organization of your staff. I was doing a lot of reading on coronavirus and other types of things, and some of these were academic papers, et cetera. And a professor from a pretty high elite institution was talking, he had an article about bricolage. I don't know if you've heard about bricolage. Bricolage is making something even when you don't have everything you need. And I feel like that's what we were all going through this year. We didn't have some of the resources we need. Perhaps we didn't have all the staff we needed because of furloughs or layoffs that organizations did. And it's the job of a leader is to try to figure out how to build and keep the organization going, even when you don't have everything you need. So again, that's called bricolage. And at the River Museum, we faced that. March 17th, we closed for 10 weeks. We lost about 35% of our annual revenue. So think about that. Think about your organization losing over 1/3 of their revenue for the year. We closed during one of the busiest times we have, spring break. 8,000 people came this year during spring break. Prior to that, we would have even more. And then with all the school groups that would come to see us, it was a really, really important time for us financially. What's unique about an aquarium, a River Museum and Aquarium, is unlike a company like McGraw-Hill, where things go like this and you shut the doors and you turn the temp down, you save a lot of money, we can't do that. We have to keep the fish and animals alive. The well-being of them, the life support, the utilities, all of those things, those expenses are very high and they don't reduce. So no revenue comes in, but guess what happens? Your expenses stay the same. So how do you manage through that and how do you handle that? We also have over 50,000 artifacts here, historical artifacts. They have to be stored safely, correctly, the right temperature, the right humidity. So in some organizations, you can really lop off some expenses and try to match your lack of revenue, but in a place like an aquarium and a museum whose history and mission lead us to really have to take care of the well-being of our fish, animals, and artifacts, that's a difficult situation for us to face. So we did 3 things when Governor Reynolds mentioned that we had to close. The first thing we did is that next day we started working on a reopening plan. I put together a team which we named the Corona Avengers. That was nicknamed for them because it was across the entire company, and their goal was to have every aspect of our organization, from historical collections to living collections to guest services to the museum store to facilities, housekeeping, etc., get together and figure out what are the new protocols, what are the new processes, what are the new social spacing things we need to do as an organization. The other thing we did was we were looking at new ways to generate revenue. So we put together a different group that would explore opportunities and brainstorm and come up with ideas as to what kind of new virtual events, what kind of new other events, what kind of new things can we do with social media that may be able to generate some revenue. And then we also added to that, what are things that won't add to revenue, but will stay in touch with our guests, with our members, with the people who are so passionate about our property. So if you look at all these things that we did, virtual experiences, new educational programs online, videos and social media from the Matthias Ham historic site showing how you make cornbread in the old days, to how you diagnose what an owl has eaten in the last few days, to a variety of other things. And then we also did some things social media wise, including creating the Mississippi River webcam and OtterCam. I was on Iowa Public Radio with Charity Nebbe, and she told me that during my interview with her, she had OtterCam up on her screen the whole interview. It's really a fun thing. It's at rivermuseum.com. Click on webcams, and you can have this on your screen. If a manager comes by, click the little reduce thing and then pop it back up, because they're very, very entertaining. And what I've learned about this is that these virtual programs, these webcams, and all these other types of things, we're going to carry with us going forward. They also made a connection with our guests and members and people that love us, that missed us, and it gave them an opportunity to do that. And then we've also figured out we have safety measures, new different things with our HVAC, etc., sanitizing protocols. We were sanitizing 7 times a day. All of those other types of things are going to be carried with us, even when we get back to whatever the new normal could look like. And one of the other things that we took the opportunity to do, which we've always wanted to do, but we didn't really have time to do it, was to redo some of our educational programs, update them, tie them better to the standards that the schools have, new examples, new different things like that. That's always been a plan for us, but we've been so busy, especially when schools are in session, we have all those visitors coming, the education team couldn't do that. Those are other experiences that are going to be carried with us. So goals. So leader needs to consistently convey organizational goals, especially if they have changed because of an unplanned event. So one event that has happened to the coral reefs of the world is that they are facing a disease, the stony coral tissue loss disease, And then they're also facing bleaching because of climate change, and that is destroying the Florida Reef Tract and the Great Barrier Reef and other reefs. And the reefs are their own underwater rainforest. They house almost 25% of all known marine life and species, but they cover less than 1% of the ocean. And when they are being decimated by disease and bleaching, it really affects the water, the quality of the water, because they're great filtering animals. And so for the very first time, because of this crisis, the Association of Zoos and Aquarium and U.S. Fish and Wildlife decided that they needed to harvest coral that wasn't affected by the bleaching or the disease and house them in areas where they can be incubated, and then when the diseases have run their course, put back into the reef, the Florida Reef Tract, south of Florida. We are the first organization outside of Florida, the first aquarium to get coral from the Florida Reef Tract. This is one of our corals here. We have over 60 corals. We're growing them, we're taking care of them, we're helping them survive with the goal, the ultimate goal is to be able to put them back and replenish the reefs. Very, very proud of this. And the Association of Zoos and Aquarium and U.S. Fish and Wildlife have been very clear that this is a goal of theirs, is to save the coral reefs, which in fact saves the oceans for us. So we're proud of our organization to be the first. And we did a presentation at the Association of Zoos and Aquariums, and our presentation was called Corals in Iowa. What? Wait, what? And we were really not celebrities to a certain extent, but everybody came up and talked to us about how are there corals in Iowa and what are you guys doing? And we had pictures of how we're taking care of them, et cetera. So that's an example of having a goal and making sure all the people who are working on this project are in sync with that goal. During the coronavirus for us, we set a new goal for us, and that goal was everything we do must ensure the safety of our animals, our staff, our historical collections, and our guests. So as we created our reopening plan, as we looked at the exhibits that we could reopen, the touching that we have of stingrays and our sturgeons, how we did food service, the store, the museum stores, our education programs, how did all of those ensure the safety of our animals, our guests, our property, our collections, that and staff especially. And that was a challenge in some ways because a museum like ours are high touch. There are exhibits where everybody gets together. They go to the 4D theater and they're all sitting right next to each other. So we put in a lot of different protocols with social spacing to make us a place where people could come and feel like they can have that space that they need, but that they could also have fun, enjoy our property in a safe manner. So we created a reopening plan with 3 phases in them: phase 1, phase 2, phase 3. Phase 1 is the phase that was very restrictive. No touching of animals. Everybody had to be 6 feet apart, plexiglass in front of the box offices, etc. Phase 2 was when things opened up a little bit. Phase 3 was getting closer to normal. We also then decided it's not like a light switch. You don't flip it on and go from phase 1 to phase 2. We decided to be more amoeba-like. So when we realized that we could block seats off in our 4D theater and have 35% capacity, we reopened the theater. But we still didn't reopen the boat shop because the boat shop doesn't enable anybody to be far apart when they're looking at all the things that were done in the old Dubuque Boiler Works type of boat shop. And we worked on that phase by phase by phase, and then we would continue to communicate that to our team. So the teams knew the goal, and then we contacted them and communicated to them how we slowly reopened as we were able to do so. As a leader, you also need to show that we can get through this together. And optimism is a trait. It's really easy sometimes to see all these things going on with coronavirus, et cetera, and not be optimistic. So optimism is a really critical trait for a leader. And one of the most optimistic animals we have at the River Museum and Aquarium are stingrays. This is one of our stingrays, and they always look happy. They have that little smile, it looks like, on their face. They're also really curious, they're playful. And research shows that stingrays love to be touched. They like to have people come and give them attention. And when they see people, they display like this optimism that, come and see me, I want to reward you with happiness. So optimism, to me as a leader, are represented at the River Museum by our stingrays. And I mentioned this, March 17th, we closed. On May 20th, Governor Reynolds announced in one of her proclamations, zoos and aquariums could reopen on May 22nd to limited capacity. So that was less than 48 hours away. Had a quick meeting with my team, and they pretty much all said, we can't reopen in 2 days. And I said, we can open, and we will, because the Corona Avengers have created a plan that enables us to do it. And we've all seen the plan. We know the plan. We just have to execute on the plan. So 9 a.m., a day and a half away, we opened up. And what our team realized was we could do it. We had planned for it. We had taken safety, as I had mentioned earlier, into account. And then they learned something else. They missed our guests. They missed seeing the interaction, hearing the laughter in the hallways, seeing people here really enjoying themselves. We also learned another thing. Our animals missed the guests. Our otters had gained weight and they were sleeping a lot. Every day we asked our staff to go down and play with the otters, but it's not like having 10 hours a day of guests running in front of the otters and seeing them. The habitat for one of our exhibits with snakes, the snakes were moving a lot more when people were around. The stingrays were happier, the other animals were happier. So we also noticed that our animals reacted so positively to what was going on there, and they missed the people. The thing that I learned about this, and what really gave me optimism, was that after being closed for 10 weeks and walking around an empty property, you really much more easily see how special what we do is. And that's what you need to take back to your organizations too. What are the things that you're passionate about at your place, and why are you special to your customers, to your community, to your stakeholders, to your staff? Those are important things. I'm reminded daily now when I'm in the River Museum, when I walk around, or I hear laughter, or see honeymooners taking pictures, or grandparents with their grandkids, and that truly gives me optimism as a leader, but also I see that through our staff. Expert. I decided I had to become an expert on coronavirus and on some of the other things here. And I believe very strongly that you really need to dig in and learn and be an expert. This is our giant Pacific octopus. I don't know if you've seen any things about octopuses, but they are some of the smartest animals in the world. They have 8 brains. They are observational learners. So if you have 2 octopus and you give one a challenge and the other one watches it, the other one can do the challenge faster because they've seen a different octopus do it. Now we offer enrichment to all of our animals. To our octopus, we hide their food in different toys and things like that. My favorite is Mr. Potato Head, if you remember Mr. Potato Head. We hide the octopus's food in Mr. Potato Head, so the octopus not only has to take the eyes off and the hat off and the legs off, but also get the food out and eat it. And the second time the octopus does it, it's way faster. Third time, it's like just not even a problem. But they have become experts in learning and experts in their challenges they get. And I think that's one thing that our leaders and organizations like this need to do. So I decided, since I don't really have a background in health or medicine, that I was going to do anything and everything I could. All these webinars that organizations like Cottingham Butler, Han Camp, Association of Zoos and Aquariums, American Alliance of Museums present to you. All these articles that are out there, all the information CDC put out, all the information Iowa Department of Public Health put out. And I felt I needed to do that because at that time, there was misleading information coming from our leaders, the politicians, from others around. There were, you know, the anti-maskers, all those other stuff, people that were saying coronavirus isn't real and all these other types of things out there, the conspiracy things. And I just felt like I really needed to be the one at our organization to lead by learning and lead by getting rid of that clutter so that people would really realize how this can affect not only our guests, our staff, our collections, but why we needed to take this seriously and make it safe for everybody. I also realized at that same time I needed to become an expert on all the financial opportunities out there from the federal government, the PPP loan, the EIDL loan, it's the economic loss loan through the Small Business Administration, all these different types of pandemic grants that were out there for arts and culture, nonprofit organizations, and then other types of opportunities for us to apply for funding or assistance or any other types of things. I spent a few hours a day learning, reading, meeting, discussing, talking, and that was very important because we were really fighting for our survival. If you think about losing 1/3 of your revenue, you think about the financial stability of your organization, there was a time when we were really having a hard time actually paying some bills, etc. We really needed to buckle down. And that meant to me, my team needed to understand all these things, and I decided that I would be one of the sources of information for them that would help them understand how to navigate through this pandemic environment we're facing. When you do those types of things, you really need to be transparent with your staff. Consistent communication and transparency, honesty and transparency are critical. This is an upside down jellyfish. We have these over in the National River Center by the Delta exhibit. And as you can see, these are transparent animals. By the name upside down, you can imagine they actually are always upside down. And it allows them to be exposed to the sun so they can photosynthesize, but it also is a way for them to protect themselves. And what's also kind of an interesting fact is there are crabs that will come up to the jellyfish, the upside down jellyfish, and put it on their back and carry it around as a way for them to defend themselves against possible predators. So that's just kind of an interesting tidbit I've learned. But I do think one of the critical things in times like this is the transparency and communication. So you, as a manager, you don't know everything, but you certainly need to communicate, and you can't ever over communicate in times like this. And if you're walking down the hall and you're not saying hi to somebody and you're looking at your phone or something, they're wondering what's going on. So you have to be careful with your body language and your visible leadership. But I also think you can do things by dripping information to your staff and to your guests and your team that helps them know that things are going on. So here's what I know, here's what I don't know yet, here's what I think could happen. And you do that, in my opinion, in a variety of ways. You do it in different ways of communication, meetings, memos. I shoot videos that we send out to our staff. We do town halls, Zoom town halls. Hopefully we'll do those in person in the future again. It also happens in hallway meetings. It happens in any and all types of interactions. And we've added a bi-weekly communication email out to our staff, an update. And when we do that, we don't just talk about the organization. We talk about great things that have happened. If it is an achievement that one of our staff has had, or Andy Allison, the head of Living Collections, caught a really big fish the other day. We showed that to our guests, and we're really trying to keep them connected to us, but also aware by communicating them of all the things going on. So if you don't do that, guess what happens? People make things up. When they make things up, most of the time, it may not be true. And as a leader in an organization, people would say, hey, Kurt, have you heard this? And I'd say, how would I hear that? I'm the last person in the company grapevine to be told these things. So by the time that rumor has been bandering around the organization for a while, it's really difficult to correct that miscommunication. That's why you need to drip this communication out often and honestly and in a transparent way. And as you do that, your staff comes to expect that kind of communication. And they don't have to actually agree with some of the steps you may be taking, but they're informed. When they're informed, they feel more connected to the organization. This also means then you need to be open-minded. So a leader has to be open-minded, especially in times of trouble and crisis and a pandemic. This is the paddlefish. I love these things. They're really cool. Paddlefish, I don't know if they're open-minded or not. I just love the picture, but I thought that they're open-mouthed. So I couldn't figure out what kind of animal is open-minded, but I could figure out that the paddlefish is open-mouthed. And they're open-mouthed for a big reason. First of all, fossil records show that paddlefish have been around for 125 million years. And they are native to the Mississippi River. They used to be in other countries, but right now, based on research, it seems like the paddlefish are now really only focused on the Mississippi River, and that's about 30 states in the United States, since not quite as many, but the states where the Mississippi River and where the watershed of the Mississippi River is, that's where the paddlefish are found. So you can find these right outside of Dubuque by the Lock and Dam and other areas. And they swim with their mouth open because they're filter feeders. And they have structures, they're called gill rakers, which is why the word's there. And what that gill raker does is, as they swim through the water, it strains the water and gets the food out of it, and that's how they feed. So as a manager, the image for me is to be as open-minded as a paddlefish's open mouth, especially in times of crisis. First of all, don't fall into the trap to assume that how you're feeling is what everybody else is feeling, the rest of your staff, your guests, etc. I had one person say to me, well, we can't open up the movie theater, our 4D theater, because I'm just not comfortable going to a theater. And I had to remind them that, well, some other people are comfortable if, in fact, you have the right type of protocols, sanitizing and safety measures and social spacing. And then I've noticed people will also say, I've heard other people are saying this, but other people sometimes can be one person, not the consensus of the group. And as a former editor, when I would have people do reviewing of our manuscripts, I never wanted the voice of one person. I wanted the voice of all. So consensus is important. Listen to your staff, but also use a little bit of judgment as to what is your staff telling you? What are your teams telling you? And then be open-minded to things that have changed for many reasons. Remote working. Some people need time to adjust. Some people need to change their hours because of daycare needs. Their kids are home now. I need to pick up my kids, or I need to be home for 1 day a week, or those types of things. I was never the most flexible in that in the past, and now I've really realized people do their best, and sometimes they also need the organization to exhibit more flexibility for them so that they can continue to do their best for the organization and for their family, and that work-life balance that's so important. Trust. So this is our spotted turtle, and spotted turtle reminds me about a leader, that a leader must trust and demonstrate trust in everything you do, to your team, to your guests, to your board of directors, to your staff, every stakeholders, community, etc. So the spotted turtle is a strange, crazy little creature. This actually is a picture from inside the exhibit. They are really active in times when temperatures are cool, like the spring and the fall, and then they're inactive during the hottest days of the summer. That's when a lot of the other species of turtles are active. During these times when they bask in the sun, they do this for an extended period. Our turtles are in an exhibit with our river snakes, and oftentimes they bask right on the snake. And other times the snake basks on the turtle. And they do this because they trust each other, and they also don't eat each other, which is important. But they coexist together, and there's a trust there. And I hear guests say this often, there's a turtle sitting on 2 snakes. How can they do that? And they do it because that's how they coexist. So when you're with your team, with your guests, with everybody, do your very best to build a culture of trust. And you can do so in very many ways, but a few things to think about is involve them in your plans and transitions. My Corona Ventures team is so proud of the impact they've had on the organization because they built the plan and helped us execute the plan, and they had skin in the game. Inform them. Keep your team informed of everything and anything going on as often as you can in a variety of ways as you can. And then delegate things to them that are important. Give them opportunities to help out. And the last thing is thank them. I worked at a liquor store going to college in North Minneapolis, actually Brooklyn Center, Minnesota. So if you've heard about the shooting up in Brooklyn Center, Minnesota, that was where I grew up. I went to Brooklyn Center High School. And I worked at the Brooklyn Center Municipal Liquor Store. One of those was ransacked during the after the shooting happened. And our manager, who has passed away back when I was there, is a guy named Jerry Olson. Jerry built his whole career working at a liquor store, and he finally became manager. He was a great guy. He thanked me every single day. And I was like, but all I did was stock beer shelves or things like that. And he's like, thank you, I appreciate what you do. And I realized it made me work harder for him and enjoy my job more. So especially in times like this, thank your teams as often as you can. Honestly, in a real way, but make sure they realize how much you trust and how important they are to you and to your organization. So empathy is the other thing I think leaders need to exhibit in times like this, and all times really, but it's really kind of popped up to me at this stage. AZA accredited zoos and aquariums, which we are one of 240 in the world, they use education to get your guests to take conservation issues seriously. And the biggest way they do that is for them to see wildlife like Dot, our sea turtle here, and to feel empathy for them, and then to try to make the world a better place and to take care of animals like this. So Dot was hit by a boat down in Florida, and she is paralyzed. Her back legs are paralyzed. We are rehabilitating her. Sadly, she will never be able to go back out into the wild, but she has a great life here. She's well fed. She's got her own home. She's a fan favorite. She's happy. She photobombs people when you're getting a picture in front of our big aquarium. And you'll notice that there's a weight on her backside. She has a syndrome that's actually called bubble butt syndrome in sea turtles. And what bubble butt syndrome means is because she can't pass gas, she collects air back there, and then she ends up having her tail float. So our living collections team put a weight on her back, which enables her to swim and have a normal life and take care of herself and eat and have fun and swim and do all those other things. So during times of crisis, so this to me, this empathy is one of the things that Dot has taught all of us. And during times of crisis, leaders need to exhibit this kind of empathy and in fact, create space for people to share their feelings. I've learned from my daughters and wife that sometimes they don't want me to create a solution, they just want an ear to talk to. And I think that's also very important. Sometimes they just want to tell you things they're thinking about, and so there should be a safety area for them for that. The American Institute of Stress study this year said 94% of employees in 2020 exhibited stress during the year. Job security, social spacing, catching COVID, family catching COVID, I don't see my family, financial issues, all those other kinds of things caused them to exhibit a lot of stress. So as a manager, exhibiting compassion and empathy is really important. And giving them space, sometimes an ear, sometimes just an opportunity to have some flexibility, and that you demonstrate that you care about them and that you're trying to keep them involved to the organization. And the way to also do that then is to do different types of engagement activities. We created a committee called EEC, Employee Engagement Committee, and it's called EEC if you spell committee with a K, which we do for this committee. And their role is to create fun, interesting activities for our staff, our part-time staff, our volunteers, to connect them to each other and to the organization. And there's many, many examples of it. I'm just going to give you two. The first one is during Valentine's Day, EEC committee decided to hand deliver candygrams to anybody in the organization if they wanted. They just had to pay $1 for a candy, and then they would do that. We have 40 full-time staff, 60 part-time staff. 220 candygrams were sent out during Valentine's week, and that was a way people were just smiling and eating candy and having a lot of fun. But it's a way to get them to think about others in the organization. We also decided to do a virtual company picnic this year. So we're fortunate to have our own grill. And I sat behind the grill for 2 days and I cooked burgers and cheeseburgers and hot dogs, and my team, leadership team, took orders and packed up to-go boxes and handed them out to people and delivered them to people, all in the way to get them to feel like they're part of a family, part of a company picnic, but doing it in a safe manner. And it really went off very well, where the staff could come and chat and mingle, but also stay safe and then bring their food back to their own place. We also have added additional types of information, daily and twice a week updates to our staff. And we usually include a newspaper article or something funny or a tidbit or something else like that. Again, just trying to get them to remember about being connected to the team, some of the things you missed by being virtual. So laser-like focus. This is Butte, our bald eagle. Managers really sometimes have to focus and just be totally focused. So Butte came to us in 2012. Prior to that, Butte and his partner Shasta were part of a program from the Endangered Species Act to raise bald eagles since they were in danger of being extinct. And over the course of a 12-year period, Butte and Shasta had 12 different clutches of eggs, averaging about 3 eggs each. And so you can see that there's 40 or so new bald eagles that are out there due to Butte and Shasta, but then they also mate. And so they were responsible for 2 of many bald eagles responsible for protecting their population. The thing about an eagle is when you look at them, they are laser focused. And a manager needs also to be laser focused when your best is required. So I always say, be at your best when your best is required. That laser-like focus on critical tasks. Try to not multitask. Put your phone down, clear your desk off. Critical tasks to me are working on a major project. It's a one-on-one meeting with your team. It's a leadership team. It's a time when you are walking around seeing others. Give all of your attention to the people who are most important to you. There's studies that show multitasking is okay for low priority, low risk things. You can do email and 2 or 3 other things. But when you're talking to your staff, when you're meeting with your board or a leader in the organization, when you're building a project, when you're looking at how to reopen, you really need to be like an eagle, laser focused. And our laser focus also includes laser focus on the safety, as I had mentioned before, staff, animals, guests, and property. So finally, survival. A leader in times of trouble really need to focus on survival of the organization, because as we all know, many organizations didn't survive. So this is the Wyoming toad. The Wyoming toad was declared extinct in the wild in 1996. And there were only 8 of them left that they found. So they ended up giving a pair of them to a few institutions, including the River Museum and Aquarium. And so we have been breeding these toads for the past 20 years. And during that course of the time, we have sent back to Wyoming where they're found, and released over 50,000 tadpoles. We've helped save a species. So in times of trouble, you do everything possible to ensure the security of the Wyoming toad and of your organization if you are an organization. You search for any and every opportunity you can have for your financial sustainability, and that includes leaving no stone unturned. That's the grants, the new revenue ideas, the cost mitigation or savings you can do. Anything possible you can do that allows you to pay your bills is critically important for yourself, your organization, and your partners and vendors. Because it's that water flows downhill. If you're not helping the partners you have, you can't pay your bills and they can't pay their bills, and it swells to a huge amount of disaster for people. So with all these other things you do, you also have to always think about, how do I ensure the survival of our organization? And so in sort of a conclusion, leaders know that teams matter. These are 3 of the 35 types of turtles that are in our backwater marsh. And I look at this and I think about the impact that the Corona Avengers had, our cross-functional team, on our organization. And 2 things that happened was, 1, we were able to reopen safely. Number 2, they felt that they also drove the success of our organization, and they felt like they succeeded as a team. They had skin in the game. They helped our organization, and they helped our organization grow closer. In times of trouble, people band together, and you remember what's important. Working with the people you're together with, ensuring the safety and the survival of your organization are all things that really give great rewards. So I put this quick word cloud together just so you could kind of see some of the items that I was talking about that I think are really important for a leader, especially in times like this. And it really struck me that there are things you're going to carry on to the new normal, but I actually don't think there is a new normal. I think there's a kind of normal that's going to evolve and change, and it's going to be really turbulent. And the normal is different by the organization, and the normal is different by the time the organization faces what they can do by government. If the government says you got to close, that's a different thing. But these types of traits help you create and continue to create maybe your normal, or what you want your normal to be. And you may never actually get there, but you could certainly get close and make some progress towards it. The main thing is, when you are looking at what your organization was in the past and what it will be in the future, some of the lessons and the changes that the organization made will make the organization better and stronger going forward. So with that, I would like to see if anybody would have any questions.
Kurt, thank you so much. That was fantastic. I love that the animals made a great appearance in your words of wisdom today. That was excellent. Yes, as mentioned before, if you have any questions, please feel free to put those in the chat. First one I have for you, what are the big exhibits we have to look forward to in the coming months?
We have a whole lot of really new things coming up. So in June, mid-June, we're opening up River of Innovation. This is our STEM-based science, technology, engineering, math new exhibit, and it's going to have 3 components to it. The first component is a 1890s belt-driven machine shop. This is the place where in the old days they could make anything and everything in the world with all these different kinds of giant machines, and you can see them run here at the River Museum. When you walk out of that area, you're going to go into another area called Innovative Currents, and what Innovative Currents is going to do is it's going to provide an opportunity for hands-on STEM-based activities, things that are really interesting, that are fun, that will give our guests from age 3 to 103 an opportunity to learn about innovation and learn about how river towns, rivers, marine, boat shops, everything else innovated, and how we got to where we are today, and how now some of the things they used to do in a way with the gigantic machine is done with new tools and new theories, etc. And then the third component is a Makerspace, and the Makerspace is going to have a lot of equipment in, including 3D printers, a lot of hands-on different types of things. We have about 35 different STEM-based and history-based activities where our guests can discover their inner innovator. And that's a 9,000 square foot exhibit that will be opening up in mid-June. And it really does reinforce our focus on being a science center, a STEM-based organization. And it plays in with partnerships we have with the Dubuque Community Schools, with the Waterloo Schools. All 4th grade and 8th grade students from the Dubuque Community Schools come and visit the River Museum, and they do field experiences, not field trips. And the 8th graders are going to be doing a lot of engineering and STEM-based activities here, so they'll see those cross-cutting themes that apply to the next generation science standards. I'm really excited about that exhibit. This summer, we have Splash and Bubbles, which kind of talks about the path of water down through the rivers and the oceans, and it ties in with our mission of the aquarium side of us. And it's fun and it's hands-on, and it's really from about age 3 to 12. It's going to be upstairs in our traveling, the area where we have our traveling exhibits. And then we continue to refresh other types of exhibits, and that includes other types of activities, including doing some evening events, kind of a taste of a Dubuque kind of event in the evening where there'll be food and drinks, but at a smaller way in a socially spaced area. Everything we're focusing on right now is trying to give the experience we had in a safer way, but also really focus on history, conservation, and STEM education. The other new thing we have is a greenhouse, which just was built last week. Farm Tech did it for us, and it is helpful for our conservation efforts and our partnership with the County Conservation Board. And Jared McGovern, our curator of conservation, is working in there. He's in there planting a lot of things. We're going to have a pollinator garden here for the monarchs, and because we're calling it monarchs and mussels, since we raise freshwater mussels here. And then we're also going to raise some food for our animals here. And it's a great conservation message in 2 ways for our guests. And the way it's built, it's right in front of where our blacksmith shop is, and it gives the educator a platform to stand and talk about what we're doing in the greenhouse. And then it also gives us an opportunity to live the conservation message we have. So it seems like not much is going on, and then I start talking about it. I'm like, holy cow, a lot's happening.
You know what? My last visit there, I saw them building something, and I was curious what that is. That's very exciting about the greenhouse. There's a lot of great opportunities at the River Museum. We're looking forward to it. Had another question for you. It says they love the animal analogies. Out of all these leadership traits that you've identified from this past year, which do you think has been the most crucial to your role?
That's a great question. I think open-minded. You know, I think I'm really open-minded, and then my wife reminds me I'm not. And I have learned kind of with, you know, I've always trusted the teams. I think we always have tremendous people no matter where I've been. But the open-minded side for me is I was always the guy that said, well, you can't work for McGraw-Hill if you don't move to Dubuque. You can't, these kinds of things. Realizing that the world has changed, our workforce has changed, technology has changed. And the work-life balance part of this is critically important. And the fact that one of my team members on Fridays had to get his kids at 3 o'clock. So he's leaving at 3, but he's working at 4. And the flexibility, you give them an opportunity to have more flexibility, and it comes back to you in so many more rewarding ways, including a deeper connection to the organization, appreciation for the way the organization looks at the people, and just the opportunity to feel like you can have some say in how you do your job, you interact with your animals, et cetera. We have some of our living collections people, because of their students that were being not homeschooled, but were studying virtually from home, they would come in at 7 in the morning. They'd take care of their animals till about 9, and then maybe they'd come back at 6 at night and do that. And that kind of open-minded and flexibility, I think, is really important, because otherwise they struggle, we struggle, and you have really great people that deserve to be able to have some say in how they're doing this.
Excellent. And I see one of your most diligent employees, Aquaman, is there for you as well.
We are an aquarium, yes, although he's creepy, always behind me.
I got that feeling the first time we met. I thought somebody's staring at Kurt, but that's all right. It's Aquaman. He's forgiven. That looks like all the questions we have for today. I just want to remind everyone that our next luncheon will be on May 19th virtually with Zach Keeling, the new CEO of Medical Associates. And then June 16th, we will be having our luncheon. At this point, it's all up in the air, whether it's virtual or hybrid, but just know that it will be happening on June 16th with Chad Chanley from Kendall Hunt. And if you have any questions, make sure you visit our website, dubuquechamber.com, or give the chamber office a call. Virtual round of applause for Kurt. We are so happy to have you here today. We are all looking forward to our next visit to the National Mississippi River Museum and Aquarium.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you, everyone.